TVOT.
Okay, so I asked Brian and the people that were attending today. This is probably the only story-focused panel that there's going to be here. So while we're talking about things that enable interactivity and things that enable you to socialize with people while you're watching television and what the future technologies will enable, we're going to take the storytelling point of view today, and we're going to talk about, I don't know if you all, this plug for ITVT.com every Thursday at ITVT.com. We have, actually, you have yet to be interviewed.
I know, but I told you that.
Yes.
It's just timing.
Yes, please use your microphone. Oh, storyteller.
It's a timing issue.
Timing issue. Okay, so StoryCentric is on ITVT.TV.com, and it's a video column that actually talks to the people who are in the storytelling ecosystem. So when we say StoryCentric, we say there's a whole bunch of devices in the world, there's a whole bunch of ways for you to interact, but you wouldn't have anything to interact with unless it was for storytelling. So we're just going to go down the row and do some really brief introductions, and then we're going to get into it. It'll be a pretty free-wheeling conversation. Oh, first audience question for I don't know what flavor this is. Who knows what we're referring to when we say, forget about the T word? Hands up. Well, you don't count. You're staff. I can't count you.
Yells it out, though.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You're wrong. Now, Brian and I, and Tawny, when we had that first meeting, we'd appreciate it if you wouldn't use that word. And Brian, so we don't. It's like a four-letter word. We could have a whole discussion on that. But okay. So first we have to my left, Tawny Shaleski, who is Media and Portfolio Manager, Interaction Experience Research Group, Intel Labs. Can you talk a little about what you do related to storytelling?
We work with the technology behind personal media and professional media, tracking, managing, creating, storing, sharing. We work both. Most of the work I'm doing right now is actually on personal media, and I run a little black ops with Brian and his team to figure out what's next, because I think as soon as we get the personal media is a little bit easier to solve because I don't have to deal with quite as much business, but as soon as we get the
How do you define personal media?
It's easier to solve. We do these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard, which is why I am here. So.
How do you find personal media, though?
How do I define? Oh,
yes.
That's how I found it.
How you found personal media?
We went very Jackie O there. So, personal media is typically things that you have captured in your own space or relate more directly to like your active life. So not so much professional story. They lack source content other than you, or you are the source content.
So until I populate this with content, this is personal media, but I choose what goes on it. Is that?
I'm actually thinking about like your pictures and your videos.
So my own, got it. Not professional content, the stuff that I'm creating,
right, or
that I want to share and distribute with my friends or not.
There we go.
Okay, so the bottom line is, one of the reason I had Tony on this panel is because we are nothing as storytellers unless we have the pencil or the pen to write the story or the paper to write the story on. So Intel is now in the black ops. I'm not giving too much away, but how will the future of storytelling be enabled? And we're talking about literally being able to insert yourself inside the story. So I actually discovered Brian Clark on an internet video and said I have to meet this man.
That sounded really bad.
Yeah.
Can I ask for a different intro in the future, Brian?
It was a very personal media experience. And Brian is CEO of GMD Studios, and Brian is. We talk about the analogy, there's Hollywood, and then there's the independent film community. And not all interactive content or storytelling content is coming out of Hollywood in your traditional sense, like Heroes and Tim Crane or J.J. Abrams and Star Trek and whatnot. There's just like an independent film movement and an independent game movement, there's also independent storytelling and independent interactive media. Brian, can you tell us a little about GMD?
Yeah, so we've been around about 16 years, and we make my basic business model is sell half of our time for as much money as we can to brands, which frees us from venture capitalists and let us produce our own content and ventures alongside it. So I was the founder of IndieWire, which is a daily business news service for the independent film community. I've done films, I've done television, and I do a lot of work with big brands who are trying to think about how do they engage audiences and tell their stories in different ways. So that I sit somewhere between branded entertainment and brand development, but all of it from an independent perspective. So when we talk about the equivalent of J.J. Abrams or Tim, I might be talking about Lance Weiler.
Lance Weiler, yeah.
Right? Or I might be talking about Mike Manello
Manello.
and Greg Hale of Blair Witch. And so certainly there's just as many people on that side of the camp who are vigorous experimenters with technology and story, and are able to do it without as many gatekeepers that have to approve an idea before they can get it out there and experiment with it. So
I think
that's
part
what
of what
indie
was
means
great,
to us.
and you know what, you can find so much to discover about this community, but what was great when the door was open to Brian is, I come from the traditional side and stuff, but this is like one of the most exciting times to be involved in storytelling, because even the storytellers, the traditional storytellers, are very excited about the possibilities of playing with the audience. We're going to talk a little bit about the audience. And the audience is very excited about the ways of becoming part of stories and wanting to immerse themselves in stories. In Frank Rose's book, he says, the one thing I can tell you, on page 8, the one thing I can tell you is that people want to be a part of the story. They want to be immersed. And speaking of immersed, and here I am blowing smoke again, but this is Lisa Shaw, EVP of Digital Media at Bravo. Whenever I think of who's done it right, I always talk about you guys. Because the one thing that a storyteller has to do, not alter stuff for the audience per se, but we've got to know our audience, and Bravo really knows its audience. Can you talk about your day-to-day?
Sure.
I'm not going to make you talk about anything that's coming.
Okay. So, Bravo's a cable network, and the digital department 5 or 6 years ago was basically a marketing arm. So basically, you just promoted what was on air. And then I started there, and many other great people started there, and we started just pushing digital stuff out like crazy. So on a typical show like Top Chef, you'll have interactivity, voting, mobile clubs, web series, mobile series, cooking, how to cook along the recipes series, download, So I would say in a typical Top Chef, I don't know, we have 45 or 50 initiatives going on at any given time. But I would say up till now, it's either been pushing the main TV story across multiple screens or providing digital extensions, often that have absolutely nothing to do with the story. And that is, I think, is primarily due to what advertisers want, which is level 1 was getting interactivity and getting our people. So we quickly built the highest 2-screen engagement of any television network. So that was easy because reality fans are very passionate about their content. But then we had to sort of get the advertiser to pay for it. So as I was speaking at the Mashable, had their first conference this weekend down in lovely Disney World, and as I was saying, like last year was really about social TV. We really have built a lot about co-viewing companion apps and real-time viewing parties and sort of Twitter trackers where you're having conversations around the shows and talent 24/7. I would say that this year, I'm not allowed to say the T word, even though we use it and our advertisers think it's fine, dude. Really, instead of being a digital extension, like some web series where you see Gail Simmons driving around, to her favorite shops in Brooklyn because a certain food sponsor is sponsoring it, that you actually see content on a web series or mobile series that is pushing the viewing of the on-air series and vice versa. And that every single piece is driving deeper engagement, not only of the core property, but of the side properties. And the argument I'm trying to prove this year is that you actually deliver higher engagement for your sponsorship as a partner. So I would say that this is yet to be proved. I think Tim Kring's, doing some great work in that area, but I don't think anyone, I don't know, but I'm not sure any TV network has actually proved that you can help drive each other if you really are tight about it. Because right now it's a lot of extensions.
Well, okay. So, we had so many arguments in the hall, actually debates in the hallway, but let's debate that. Let's talk about that, because from my experience and the things that we're discussing, we were talking about slash fiction, and we were talking about the involvement of fans in fiction, and how they get involved in the story and how they maintain the canons. And maybe you're talking about, can you make money at that? But as we all know, everything, even the internet itself, everything starts as marketing and promotion before it turns into something substantial. So Brian, do you want to talk a little to...
Well,
do you want to bury Lisa?
Well, no. But at least from working with big ad brands, I think there is enough statistics now that have proven to them the power of engagement. across billions of impressions. The idea that the same piece of content, if it's the fourth piece in a chain of content that you've engaged, has a bigger perceptual shift than if it's the first. I mean, all this seems intuitive to any of us that have engaged in media. The longer you engage with it, the more perception shift is happening. But now there's enough statistics to prove, you know, like we did a lot of work for Microsoft, and when we started with Microsoft, they thought there were only 4 kinds of proven content that they knew they could predict the business model for, and they were like case studies and demos and VLabs and white papers, and now they go, oh, and blog posts. Like now we've proven that it's not about the impact of each individual piece of content, it's that it produces a chain of engagement where they read multiple pieces from multiple different sources, and in their, you know, A/B unaided recall testing models, that works. So now suddenly they begin to realize that there are ways to use these platforms that have reproducible effects, even if maybe we don't agree on what the techniques are that produce it. I mean, engagement's still a kind of fuzzy thing.
Yeah, I mean, that would be great if engagement was all they wanted, but what I get back a lot, since I'm on the other side of trying to convince the advertiser why this is a great idea, is do this thing with your exclusive content to build my brand's Facebook pages. Because they know they need to build their Facebook pages and their social engagement, so then you're sort of twisting yourself into a knot that has absolutely nothing to do with your story in order to build their Facebook pages. It's almost like when we partner with startups, we have the same issue too. Twitter, Facebook, like, hi, Lisa, we really want to partner with you to be the first so you can help build our business. And with advertisers, it can often be that ultimate challenge too. So yes, engagement will be great, but I find they often want more than engagement.
Well, and so this is the question then. Are those primarily media buyers, or are those like the brand agencies of record? Because I think media buyers are still really caught into their metrics measurement tools.
Yes.
And if they can't figure out how to put it into that measurement tool,
can't play.
then they can't play.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think our ad sales teams primarily deals with medians, and if you're talking directly with the CMO brand, I think you're talking more of the picture.
But you know, the thing is that, so where Brian's coming from, if I can do this, is you're there, they're telling you, help me build my brand, yes. And they're going to Brian and they're saying, help me tell my story. Yes. And so when it comes to helping tell the story, then you can start to oh God, there's so many different directions to go in here. So Brian, you once said to me, I asked you what the ideal client was, and you said the one that gives me free range and trusts me and is risk oriented and lets me play and trusts me to do the job.
Yes. I would also say in pain.
In pain, yes. Solve this problem.
Only
but
brands
the trick
in
is,
pain innovate.
let's go to the audience for a second. Let's go to the audience. Not that audience. I'm talking about the audience. It's not you guys, but the audience that's watching. So the audience, here's an audience that is living on multiple platforms, interacting with each other and brands every day, and they're like schools of fish. They go this way, then they go this way, then they go this way, then they go this way. You want to measure them. You want them to be continually engaged in the story. You somehow have to capture their attention in a second. And Brian, is it okay if you capture their attention for a second and they go away and they come back? I mean, what is the new dynamic of the audience? Because some people would say, the traditional people would say, you've got an audience that will immerse themselves in a story, immerse themselves in a canon, maintain the canon, and then other people say you got an entire audience suffering from attention deficit disorder. We can't hold their engagement. We can't hold their attention. What's going on?
Well, I think a big part of it is that the web has been pretty bad about the end of experiences. We've been really great at the beginning of an experience and how do you get someone into something, but then at the end it's like, here's 50 different things you could click. And so you sort of encourage that attention deficit disorder rather than finding ways to be, here's what you should do next. Here's the next piece.
So the responsibility, now I go to you, Tony. So big fan of Supernatural. We discuss Supernatural because I want to get into story worlds for a second, because the story world is, have you all seen Star Wars? Is there a person in this audience that hasn't seen Star Wars?
You mean the website or the
Do you know, we'll see who's fans. Who knows who Boba Fett was? Boba Fett. Sorry, got that wrong. Okay.
I was going to say you lost a geek point.
That's great,
Brian.
thanks to a Christmas special. So Boba Fett actually entered into the world as a character on a different platform, not in the movie. So you have different points of entry into the story world, and the audience, let's go to fiction for a second. You have an audience that say watched Heroes or watched Lost or Flash Forward, had another great following audience. And these are audiences that are involved in the mythology. You're moving into user experience and the way people interact with content. Where do you think the audience is headed in terms of standing inside of these worlds. How do they want to play?
Well, I think.
And whose responsibility is it to maintain the world?
Well, audiences have always played inside that mythology. I mean, I think now they have an audience. So it used to be, right? You had your fanship, and you and your buddies went out back, and you tied a towel around your neck, and the yard was your world, and that was your place. So your audience was the dog and your mom when she called you for dinner. Now you play on YouTube, so now you can create an audience with your fanness, right? Your engagement with the mythology enables you to actually make something that goes out that 500,000 people can see, or still your mom and your dog can see, depending on whether it's fun or not. But I think those engagements are there. I think our big question is, how do you push it back to the backyard? So the great thing about the backyard, right, was it took a towel and a buddy, and then you went off, right? And you could spend all afternoon and you were there, and it didn't take a lot of effort or engagement. You just wanted to play. And how do you move technologies into a place where people can do that and have those kind of spontaneous, fun, make interactions without being a techno geek and spending, 24 hours in front of a computer screen to make something, because then you only have a small group of people who will do that.
But you look at
Can I
people.
push you on that, though?
You can.
So they're doing it
Please do.
already without you. I mean, the panel
Yeah.
right before this said that the key question was, who owns the subscriber?
Right.
And like the challenge of that across multiple platforms. If I went from a TV and I was subscribing to Time Warner, and now I'm on my iPhone and I'm an AT&T subscriber, who owns that? And really what you're begging the question is, who owns that fan relationship?
Right.
Is it the author? Is it the
Okay,
network?
I want to go once. Go ahead, answer him, and then I'm going to go once.
Nobody owns that relationship. Sorry.
That's it.
No one owns her. How
Yeah.
dare you? How dare you?
but-
Except maybe Mark Cal that makes the towel that she puts
Yeah,
around her
yeah.
neck. So, but the idea is here, okay, creating story world. So it's, I'm sure you know, Lisa, what it is to have an audience or a fan that's out of control, how they take possession of the brand and they run off with it and they make it their own. One of the greatest examples is, does everyone know what happened with Mad Men and Twitter? That the people started twittering as the Mad Men characters, and A&E went to shut them down, and it was a public relations nightmare. In 24 hours, it was over. It just shows the desire of the fans. So I'm a storyteller. I get it. I need to keep it simple. I look at Connect on Xbox, and I think, oh my God, the possibilities of that are endless. I just wave my hand. That's very simple. I can't do Dance Dance Revolution because I'm too old. And I'm not wired that way. But there'll be other ways where I can go in and participate in the story. I mean, you look at the Milo video, on where you're actually engaging with the characters of the story. I think that while all this technology is going on, it's really incumbent upon the storyteller to understand, number one, the responsibility that they have over setting up the world, and two, and I don't know how to answer this question, where their control ends, that delicate balance between the control of the storyteller and the brand manager, because we've talked about that, storyteller, brand manager, storyteller, I don't know. I think they're interchangeable at times. We're not arguing about that. We had that one out there. So how is that going to work? Let's all talk about that. Who's in charge of creating that world?
Well, can I use Flash Forward as an example?
Yes.
So
David Goyer's Flash Forward.
David Goyer's Flash Forward. David Goyer was a collaborator of mine on Freaky Links back in 2000. So we had done something that was very deeply interactive between web and television show, where instead of launching with a pilot, we launched with a website 9 months before anyone even knew there was a television show. So by the time the television show announcements came out, everyone was saying, oh my God, Fox is ripping off your life, Derek. And the audience was kind of confused about whether they had a relationship with a real person or a character. So Flash Forward was David trying to attempt that same thing, and you could tell that the studio messed it up for him. All these wonderful shots where you see someone typing in a URL for like Blue Hand, and you're like, oh, wow, okay, maybe I'm supposed to type that in on the web, and you type it in and you get server not found. And you're like, well, that's kind of curious. Who owns the domain name? Oh, Fox Television. Registered the exact day in the story that it was supposed to happen. And you go, okay, I could see all of the pieces here that David's tried to set up to create this opportunity to engage the fans in that spot in between the weeks. And then clearly something went off the rails in the implementation.
Well, here I think is what's going on, and this is a big issue. I'm, in the interest of full disclosure, I work with Tim Kring, and he's got a new show, Touch and whatnot, and there is this lack of understanding on their part because, you've got one platform, television, It's going to be the anchor platform for the brand. It is the greatest mass exposure that you can still have. And I know David had created an entire world that we never actually got to see.
Exactly.
You know, because the television has its own mandate, and you look at ABC, they completely redid their schedule this morning. You know, so all these shows that you might have liked, like I loved V, it was my guilty pleasure. Mythology is associated with V. I'm sure there's a huge fan community. So, and here's the rub. Just like NBC owns Heroes, ABC owns V, ABC Studios I think owns V, and it will die. And the world is created, and that world that is created, David Gore's world of Flash Forward, had the network not owned the rights to that.
Correct.
And I think there's
Are you advocating an independent mindset to content creators?
Well, I think this is happening anyway because I'm watching negotiations happen right now with storytellers and the networks, and the storytellers, more powerful storytellers, albeit, holding back their rights. But so, Tim, now that Comcast has bought NBC, maybe there's a chance for Heroes to not live on television, but to live somewhere else in graphic novels and games and whatnot, which the network will see as licensing and revenue, which the storyteller will see as extension of the worlds. Go ahead, Tony.
No, I'm just thinking along the lines here. I think part of a lot of what the problems we run into all of this is this takes a very Baroque approach, right? There's a lot of waste.
And a BROKE approach.
Yeah, that too. No, it leads to that, but we try not to start there. You have in all of these, in the creation of the stories, a bunch of stories die every day, right? Good stories, bad stories, crappy stories. The fact of the matter is, if you go back through the life cycle, if you go back 20 years in the content of television, you could look at all of the stuff that's there. Most of it's gone. And that's okay. Things live, things die, right? Everything has a cycle. So I think we get attached to things and we're like, we have to make it live forever. And it's like, things don't, right? So there is a sort of wash of things coming and going. And I think if a studio and an owner thinks the same way, which is, I can get some revenue back, right? I made this thing, and it may have made me broke to make this thing. And so I need revenue. I need a stream, and I need more money so that I can make the next thing, right? I don't have to capture every dime. We were also talking in the hallway about some corporations that are really pretty determined to have every dime. Every image is mine. You know, and somewhere in between, right, in which you can have this sort of generosity of spirit, for lack of a better word.
But isn't that
to throw it out, let some things come back, and let that wash be healthy.
But there's so many other ways to monetize content. I mean, I had the honor of listening to Gerd Leonhard over the weekend, and just about monetizing everything but the content and the data, and pointing to how Google is doing the new business models of being able to monetize everything around it, and it's the data that's valuable, and it's blah 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 blah, and maybe that will creep in because the traditional television business. I mean, some of the storytellers that you speak to, they know the TV business is in trouble, and they're trying to hedge their bets in the new world as well as the old world. But when you talk about the opportunity to have a story live on, there are some mythologies, like Star Trek was a canceled series. There are some mythologies that can live on, and there are some mythologies that the fans will not let die because they identify with it. It's like Dan Harmon, who created Community, says, listen, the thing that's still true is that you want to think the guy in the story is the guy that lives right down the block from you. Whether he's a mass murderer, an adulterer, whatnot, you have this fantasy that he lives down the block from you. So getting back to audience control, so you have the mythology. The audience is now fan fiction, huge. You call it slash, you call it fan fiction. And the fans, I remember the staff of Heroes saying that they had to go to the fan wiki to consult the wiki to make sure that they were still consistent and authentic in the show, because the fans had kept better track of what they did than the writers had kept track of what they did. So now we have an audience, and in the hallway, you should have been in the hallway. In the hallway, you said, no, this has always existed. And yes, the world of universal storytelling has always existed. Create a universe. You know, John Chu says Christmas was the first multi-platform brand. Yeah. And the most successful multi-platform brand.
Yeah, because everybody knows before that.
The Torah. Oh, yeah, I remember, decorating my Torah tree was a fabulous experience. But, like everybody has a Christmas story. They have their own stories about Christmas, their own families. They've made it their own. They have songs, they have games, they have foods, and everybody knows the main story. Or the two-track, the A story, which is Jesus, and the B story, which is Santa Claus. But it is a truly multi-platform and now multi-platform interactive brand. So is there this sea change? Look, your audience is highly interactive, Lisa, right? And are they becoming, I guess the word would be, more possessive or aggressive of the content that you create now?
once again, there's so many things to say about what
I
you're
know,
saying.
this is like, you know,
It's
we needed
it's
a day
but
workshop.
When you use an example of the Christmas thing, can you really think of a TV show or property that really has been able to convert into that mythology, even like a Lost? You know, which Lost did that brilliant campaign of season, what do they call it, with season over season, where they had that character and they had those stunts in the location, and then that guy who like kept on saying what was happening. But that, you know, that died after that. After that season, it didn't keep on.
But Brian would tell you that it depends where the brand starts. So, for example, those television brands, you got to build hits. And that's when you don't build a hit, that's when it dies. When Lost got lost, it got lost. You know, when Here's the Strike killed a lot of these brands. But then you look at the superhero comics. I mean, Superman is still alive. Supernatural, another expression of the Superman canon, the Superman brand. Maybe they.
So you're questioning television altogether.
I'm what?
You're questioning TV altogether because
I'm
what
not
you're
questioning
citing
TV.
are other media brands.
All I'm saying is, okay, here we go.
You
No,
stumped
I'm
him.
not questioning television. I'm saying there are appropriate anchor brands. Anchor platforms for different stories. So Brian, where was Art of the Heist? Brian did Art of the Heists. If for those of you that remember, with Audi and the stolen car and everything, where was that anchored?
That was anchored online. I mean, that's where we understood was the opportunity to really connect with those fans. So we used television commercials in a different way. We used them as a narrative device more than a brand marketing device. We used, you know, Times Square billboards, but it was about this car's stolen. If you know about it, call this 1-800 number. So it's like all of them were meant to be, you know, in alternate reality gaming, they'll use the phrase rabbit hole. Right, that moment where Alice went tumbling into Wonderland, and so you try to use those.
There's a brand that's lasted.
Exactly. Well, and in the same way you were talking about the Beast story of Christmas, that was, I mean, Santa Claus is a creation of marketers. It was not a creation of storytellers. It was a creation of marketers to tie into that holiday and not do it in a way that would bring too much of the religion into the
And as
equation
a
of it.
Jewish boy, I could really get with Santa
And
Claus.
that's
but
what
I
I'm
couldn't
saying.
Get with Jesus.
And now you have Hanukkah bushes, right? So I mean, it all like kind of goes full circle. But I think if you know, for me, I approach it as an experienced designer. So for me, the story is something that's abstract, that doesn't exist inside of a media channel. And then you start thinking about, okay, what are the best ways for an audience to experience the story? And sometimes that involves long-form television. Sometimes that anchors there. Sometimes it anchors on the web. I'm doing.
Okay, but what if you're taking the marketing approach now, and you say, okay, great. So, although I won't mention the show, you say, okay, the fastest way to launch this experience is a miniseries. They're coming back anyway. Anthology shows are coming back.
Telenovela.
Telenovelas.
etc. Yeah.
The fastest way to launch this is a miniseries, and then it disappears. But would you lay a lot of groundwork before that series came? If the series was about magicians, would you go out to the magician community that lives on the net and seed that, just like Ink seeded the tattooing community before they ever launched the television show?
Now,
And
I
then-
would as an independent, right? Because for me, it's about building that community of fans. And that community of fans, I mean, any independent storyteller can tell you a fan is more important than a customer. Because a fan will buy more stuff. A fan will be with you from property to property. Tim would say the same thing, right? Tim's success with one property translates into fans in another property.
He's got over 100 million fans around the world who are literally waiting for his next move.
So
but
where are
that's
your
about him.
fans?
That's not about the story.
But no, not entirely, because whenever you're making a story, you're thinking about who's the audience that this is going to relate to. Because you're not making a story just to make it. Otherwise, you just write it in a notebook and stick it on your shelf and be done with it. You believe it will create a connection between you and some audience. So where is that audience, and how do you make that connection? This is similar to this 9/11 project that I'm working on right now. So we know, 9/11, the media is going to mess this up, right? CNN's going to run it minute
He's talking
by
about the
minute.
10th anniversary.
10th anniversary coming up. And we know that this is a sensitive subject. Museums are kind of hesitant to bring their collections out yet because they're not sure it's big H history. We're in an election cycle, so everything's going to get politicized. But the idea of creating a meaningful online dialogue through video as a way of producing something that will end up in television. So
but
if
it's
I
a
could
populist experience. You're actually going to people and asking them about their experiences. Yes?
Sure, but isn't that what documentary filmmaking has always been?
Right. No.
Right?
But-
So you've just got a new way. So the internet doesn't have to be just a way to engage the audience around a finished story. It can be a way to engage the audience in the writing of the story and the collaboration of the development of that IP at the very beginning. Because you get it's the best market-focused group ever. Like,
Well,
the fans will tell you what they like and what they don't like, and you can adjust based upon that.
Well, and I think it is like what you're saying, the documentary, right? Which is actually, the thing is, as everything is new, everything is the same, right? You go out with your camera and your microphone and you interview 700 people. Not because your documentary is going to have all 700 of those interviews, but because you want to get these things. And I think the web
Right.
is a mechanism of doing that. It's a tool that lets you do something. It opens it up. It changes that relationship a little bit. It's not quite as, but it's basically that tool, right? Which I'm going to collect up all this information so I can piece it together as a storyteller and make something out of it.
Well, and I think that's one of the interesting things that we need to keep talking about, right? Because in traditional fiction, the writer is the storyteller, or the writer-producer, or you've got some other roles there. But in documentary filmmaking, the editor is the storytelling.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Like-
No. Actually, in fiction, the editor is just as much a storyteller
I
as the
agree.
writer.
But that's what I'm saying. I think
but,
that we could talk about models like that.
Right, but
where
but there's something that you mentioned, and it is that going back to fiction. So I'm the storyteller. I create the world, and eventually if I'm going to believe in this multi-platform world where the audience is going to have participation gateways and they're going to have different ways to interact and experience the story, eventually I'm going to have to realize that they are now part of the story and they will write the story. I want you to...
But they have already. Like, can I just bring up an example? So you've got Spider-Man the musical in New York right now, right? They did one.
Still?
Well, and now they're in a 3-month of rewriting. They fired they did a week of shows to see what an audience thought of it, and they fired the director and are retooling the second act. And in 3 months, it will reopen again. So didn't the test audience have a role in the storytelling?
Yes. I agree. It's the same thing with ratings and stuff, but that isn't necessarily what I was talking about. I was talking about, and I wanted to go into the world of fan fiction and the world of canon maintenance and it going awry, so I can write a story that I think is fabulous, and the fans decide that they're going to take the two main characters and put them into a love affair.
They're just brothers. Come on, it's fine.
Yes,
You know.
into a bromance. It's actually
Yeah.
more than a bromance. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because
Well, I think that I just think that you have that you write a story, and I think you're right. Unless you just put it on a piece of paper and tuck it under your mattress, you intend it to go to an audience. And once it goes to an audience, you lose control of it. And that's all there is to it. It's always been the case, right? Somebody always gets to reinterpret it. And I think that you have, as a story writer, right, you have your own canon and you have maintenance of your canon if you're going to do a long thing. And probably you have to just be excited about the fact that somebody has been sufficiently inspired by your canon to create a competing canon, which is basically what these things are. And I think
but the competing canon. Okay,
Doesn't
so
have
can
to-
you give an example of the competing canon that is like
Well,
slightly left of center?
Well, so like Supernatural, has a very active Slash community, and has all kinds of fun things going on there. And the producers bring that back into the show. So they create a character, and the character writes novels about the two main characters, and then fans of the novel inside the show write Slash fiction about that. So they bring it
Slash
all,
fiction is
the tends to be guy on guy, unauthorized, non-canonical romance.
I was gonna say typically in a blue fashion.
Typically,
right?
typically pretty blue. And these guys play with it. And what happened is
So to speak.
But if I could throw out one word, because there's a word we haven't said up here yet that I think
T-word?
defines what you.
The T-word?
No, it's the C word, curator. Right? So the show is serving as a curator of what the audience is writing. Not everything that the audience writes ends up in the show. Someone is making the choices of which of those bits are really great enough to include back into the canon.
which are interesting enough, or which are fun enough, or
Which goes back to the responsibility of the storyteller, because again, the storyteller not only creates the world, but maintains it and curates it, or the people who he trains, like Greg Berlanti. The great thing about a Greg Berlanti show is that after 2 years he leaves the show, he trains enough people in the characters and whatnot that they can continue to maintain his story world while he goes off and creates a new show. So when you have someone maintaining the story world, like we talked briefly, you and I, about Bar Karma.
Yep.
And what is called collaborative crowdsourced fiction. And I didn't think it worked because there was no story world set up. It was just soliciting stories. Where do you want to go now? But when you have the story world, so now does the storyteller have to be not just a writer, not just a curator, but a technologist, right? Because the storytellers now want to come to you and say, here's what we imagine. Can you make that happen?
You betcha.
And then also an entrepreneur, an ad salesperson,
But you're describing a team, right?
Right.
We love to be in love with the myth of the auteur, but we all know that work gets made by great teams, right? So whether the story of the director being, or the producer or the showrunner being the storyteller with capital letters is largely a construct that we create for audiences to create.
I got it,
fans.
but I would disagree with you, and I would say to the fact that there still
course
is
you
someone's
would, Brian.
That's
why you invited me.
Someone is the vision. Someone is the visionary, and he has to be, or she has to be able to share that vision enough with everybody else. The people who create the shows on Bravo, Housewives has been such a successful vision that they're able to recreate it. Franchise.
But Tim is a great storyteller, and is he all of those things you listed? Is he an entrepreneur and a technologist?
No, you're right. He's
and a
hiring people.
storyteller?
He's hiring people that are.
Well,
but,
and I think you can also.
but he
play
has
this-
his vision.
Yeah.
He
Sure,
knows what.
absolutely.
But you can start this spontaneously, right? I mean, I think we get kind of wrapped up in, like, before you tell a story, you have to have your world and your marketing plan and everything else. And the fact of the matter is, like you said, I go back, date myself with the fact, a lot of this starts on the back of a peachy, right? Which is, you start with a story, and it can be very small and it can be very personal. And there's no reason in this world, and in fact, there's less reason now than ever that you can't start with the smallest conceivable grain of a story and just see what happens. You can pop it out there, and it's like, certainly you want it to run, right? You wanted to get out there and start attracting people and start getting demand for a world.
And that's exactly what happened. I mean, I don't know if you all know Hayden Black, but Hayden Black, after producing Goodnight Burbank couldn't get a door open at a network after producing Goodnight Burbank for 5 years on his own. Now he's on Hulu. But when you talk about well, one of the things that we've actually talked about in our meetings is how a whole story can be told by characters introducing themselves over Twitter and viral marketing to let people know that something's up. So the story is being told in 140 characters by characters on Twitter. So I want to shift gears for a second, because sometimes a client will say, oh, well, we have to have a Facebook page. We have to have a Facebook page. Or, oh, that augmented reality thing. We want to do something in that augmented reality thing. Or
shiny.
What's the thing about alternate reality gaming? We don't know what it is, but it seems really hot.
We need one. We don't have one of those.
Get us one of those. How much is that going to cost us? So,
we keep a whole box of those. With
yes, here's a little alternate reality game for you. So here's your own little rabbit hole. Do your slash fiction with a rabbit hole and be arrested for obscenity and the rest of the day. But here's the thing. Lisa, when you go to choose what you're going to do around a show, is it templated, like you say, oh, this worked for this show, so it's going to work for this show? Or is it bespoke or unique to each show? Or do you take your cues from the audience because you see them behaving? So just a quick example, in Heroes, 2/3 of the content was done by the fans the first year out. It's flipped. They watched what the fans were doing, and then it all came under NBC.com, and there was just 1/3 that was fan content outside the domain because they started serving the fans' needs. How do you decide?
And how did NBC.com do on that? I wasn't a Heroes follower. When they picked up
They
on
did
what
really
the fan,
well.
They did it well. Great.
Yeah, they did really well.
Uh-huh.
And the interesting thing about NBC is that, and this is happening with a lot of other companies, is that, they can't go out and grab third-party software to have them do what it needs to do. So they're starting to create software inside NBC that they can leverage across all their properties. So my question, going back to the question, is how do you decide what to put where? How do you prioritize? How does money figure into it?
Well, what I like to say is that we are huge experimenters. Some people call it innovation. I just say we throw a lot of spaghetti against the wall. And what I've discovered is the fans are always ahead of us. It's like what Brian said. It's like, I'm always worried about complicated thing. Is it too complicated? As long as you make it a good user experience, they're there. So, I've actually, so we were the first ones to launch social TV. The idea of doing Facebook and Twitter, like Current had done it during the election, and then CNN sort of put Facebook pests during the inauguration.
And then the Emmys aggregated Facebook and Twitter in the
exactly, and then
one feed.
Then we aggregated. Did they do it before us?
Uh-huh.
What
with,
year,
with
month
E.
did they do it?
SmackDown.
All right,
SmackDown.
let's discuss months.
E.
Okay, so anyway, whatever. So, when we did it, and then there was just huge, we did it with Project Runway 6 years ago. They were like, well, should we ask people if they want to vote on SMS and who should win? I barely knew what an SMS message was, so we just tried it, and there were like hundreds of thousands of votes. So I just realized that you just have to try it out there, and I think my greater challenge is, number one, how to finance it. So it's a lot of that trend. You do get that like augmented reality is, and of course the advertiser generally, the advertiser versus the brand is usually about a year or two behind.
Yep.
Where you are.
And I threw that augmented reality company
you get
at
a
you.
lot of like, we want to be in social now. You're like, okay. so we already have some templated things for that. But my personal interest is always trying to do the latest innovation and doing whatever the kind of thing that could get us to the next level. And I think the thing we struggle with now is not only how to fund it, but luckily we get a lot of shiny money, by being the shiny new toy, but how to bring the pieces together so it's a really unified experience.
And how do you work with the storytellers? How do you work with the producers?
This has been a very long ongoing thing, just like it was to a T. The money at Bravo was driven by the on-air. And particularly with Kindness Reality was easier because there are lots of interactive things you can do. But with a docudrama like Real Housewives, anything that's a story is taking away from something that could have been. The best fight, they want to have it on air, they don't want to have it on another property. So that was just, I'd say, the battle I've been fighting the last 6 years. But they suddenly, now that the financial equation is such that, people are saying, like, I don't want that unless I have this digital piece. Now they're reassigning, and there's going to be a dedicated digital person within the programming and development staff, which has been up till now 0. So we're definitely moving in the right direction. But the storytelling, to me, just hearing you guys talk is hilarious on a fiction sense, because it's not driven. To me, it sounds so fairy ideal, whereas I'm driven by business.
So Lisa, does that replace ratings to a certain degree?
Is that Channing Dawson back there?
What replace ratings?
So is that an extension of ratings?
You mean digital?
No, whatever you do in digital in extending the story, right?
Yes.
Most producers would say, or programmers would say, I don't want to hurt my ratings in any way.
Yeah.
So is this going to take away from
Well,
my ratings?
when we did the first experiment with social TV, and we did, you could do Facebook and Twitter, and we push content and send them in meters and polls while you watch the show as a 2-screen experience. I did heavy research and proved there was a 10%. It was so much work, but it was a 10% lift in ratings. Suddenly, interested. So if you just, we really had to approach it from their point of view, and I think increasingly they see it, and they, now I'm heavily pushing into connected TVs, and they're all sort of like, well, what is that? And we're all doing Connect in the little conference room. And they're like, well, what is that? And we're like,
But you also have the opportunity for 24/7 engagement when the show is not on the air, and to maintain the community, to maintain the interactivity in the community. They talk about Anthony Bourdain and his relationship that he actually goes on and tweets live during the shows when his show plays. And you look at all the stuff that's being done with Jimmy Kimmel.
Jimmy Fallon.
Your guy, Jimmy Fallon, and some great examples of the audience becoming a greater part of the show, maintaining the community. Conan O'Brien's, the Team Coco, they're engaged 24 hours a day, waiting for that show to come on.
Well, it's very funny to watch, like the Real Housewives in the beginning when we first had them tweet, etc. They're like, well, how do you do this thing? And it's sort of, I don't really have the time to do this. Suddenly they realized it was building their own brand equity. And at one point during the viewing party, we decided to put the Real Housewives down by the number of followers. So at the bottom of the thing, you saw the 5 housewives and how many followers.
Oh my God.
Suddenly
Oh my gosh,
they got
that's a great
super
idea.
invested.
Great
And
idea.
well, it was just, but we were able to. That's why I say the fans follow you. Like, also the talent saw the advantage to them as well.
It was really interesting during the VH1 Video Awards. They had the Justin Bieber versus Britney Spears or something like that, and the numbers kept going back and forth. And it's really, it's funny. It's like the thing that's holding everyone accountable right now. That whether you want to be held accountable or not. I want to shift gears just briefly before we go to questions from the audience. What I love, we talked about this briefly, what I love is the fact that when I leave Netflix on my PC and pick it up on my iPad, it picks up exactly where I left off. And what I want to know from you primarily is, in the future, if I immerse myself in the story world, so say I'm jumping into the world of V, I'm actually sitting on the craft, I'm actually having a Disneyland experience in my house with my Xbox Live or whatnot, regardless of whether I immerse myself emotionally or physically into the show. This idea of persistent world, leaving the world where you are at the level of the game that you're at or at the level of the story that you're at, exactly, leaving it and then coming back into it from another gateway. Is that the future? Are we going to be able to come and go like that?
Yes.
That's fabulous.
I love a short answer. Look at that.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, Perfect. I think that's part of it. I think certainly in that, and that's kind of just that's a straight technology question, right? Which is like, I have an interaction and I want to stop it and restart it, and you can do that. I think actually more interestingly is that you can take it with you in ways that are different, right? Being able to take, if you become the Uber V fan, right? Being able to, how can you take that with you, and how can the people who made V get paid for it as you take it with you into places that maybe they didn't think about? Because I think what Lisa was talking about a lot, right? That's a massive amount of effort. And that's like, she owns and makes every one of those pieces. And if you think about fan fiction, right, you have this sort of very independent, doesn't really help you, except for maybe, I mean, it helps build fanness, I suppose, but it's not really connected, right? You're not getting paid for that.
Unless
And
I
how
find
do
a way
you-
to aggregate
right.
that content
I think
and
there's
curate
stra-
that content.
Yeah. And there's spaces, right? There's spaces in curation. There's spaces in sort of propagation. If you think about all of this, is just all of this right now is just data. So Batman is just a data stream, right? And who is the character of Batman is just a data stream, and it can be broken
Someone
down
better
into that.
tweet that.
Yeah.
I wanted to tweet that. That's a good. Batman is just a data stream.
And so what can you do? You know, our big question, right, is what can we do with that? How can you then track it, find it, use it, leverage it, take it with you places you want to go that you don't even think about now?
And that was
that
Jared
Warner
Leonard's
Brothers
whole
doesn't
thing.
have to do it himself.
Yes.
So.
Okay, your questions, and then I have a final question for all of you. So anyone have a question besides chatting? Yes, can you tell us your name, where you work, what your
Hi,
dream is?
Clayton Banks with Ember Media, do app development. This quick question: when you have a show that has ran the course, it's canceled, what happens with the infrastructure that you've built around it? Do you archive that stuff? Do you get rid of it because there may still be fans contributing or so forth? I was just curious how you handle
I mean,
that.
at Bravo, we you can still find the show on the site, and but we don't actively maintain it. So the show was canceled for a reason, and we have a limited staff, so we just have to choose our priorities, and our priorities tend to go to the shows that are on the air that are being monetized. But we don't make it go away.
But the fan stuff is still active.
Yeah.
The fan stuff remains active.
Yeah,
Like with
chat
Heroes, the
rooms.
Heroes Wiki is still
Yeah.
flashing up. Well,
Can't you just shut some stuff down?
You can. I mean, I could give you an example, like from Art of the Heist, which was an ad campaign. It was up for a year. And then basically Audi had to make the choice on whether they wanted to relicense talent, relicense music, go through all of that issue. And they didn't want to sink more money into it, and so it all got taken down. And now the only archives are the ones that are maintained by the fans. Because Audi's opinion was, oh, okay, no one's going to complain that the fans are archiving their favorite pieces of this media. So I think
the bottom line is it won't be maintained unless it's making money.
Well, or more importantly, if you have less to lose, you can give it over to the fans.
Well, that was the Star Wars Uncut.
Yeah, which I loved.
Yes. Jared Boygan is my name, TVWB Strategies. I was thinking specifically of Bravo, but I think all three of you might have a perspective on this. Now that you have so much audience interactivity outside of the live TV platform, do you anticipate actually trying out potential TV content with that audience? Because once they've sort of engaged with you enough, let's say, think of Project Runway as an example, right? They've been engaging so long and for so many years, you have a really good sense of what they're into, what they react to, what kind of other programs they might be interested in. Does that give you an opportunity, and have you started to explore, and do you anticipate more of that, where you might use all of this online opportunity that doesn't cost you your network airtime?
Okay, so
to
will
try
you be
out
using
that
online?
content?
He's asking us if you're using online as a distribution platform as opposed to the network.
You mean to distribute the? I'm confused. You mean to distribute the on-air pieces or the digital content pieces?
Say, if you launch a new show, would you launch it online?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
Sci-Fi is
Oh
launching
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Mercury Men.
we watched Watch What Happens Live with Andy Cohen was launched online. It was literally shot in our conference room, and it just sort of took on. It was the art director was the cameraman. I mean, it was so GarageBand, and now it's it gets millions of viewers.
Big star.
So it just transferred over. It absolutely is possible. It just has to be for the right kind of show.
One more question. Okay, so a quick question real fast. First of all, I'm going to say thank you to Lisa, thank you to Brian, thank you to Tawny, and thank you to you. Technology that is in the pipeline or that you know of that excites you personally the most. Lisa, for storytelling.
I think sync apps for the second screen has a lot of potential. It's not there yet, and the examples you've seen so far have been extremely clunky. But once you can truly sync a show to a second screen experience, you can create a whole other storytelling platform.
I had one storyteller telling me that he would prefer all the advertising be on the second screen.
Wouldn't every storyteller? I would say there's this great outfit in New York called Condition One with a photographer named Dan Fong Dung, who was a New York Times war photographer. And now he's experimenting with a camera that does 180-degree filming. And when he's delivering it on the iPad, and it's war photography, like in Afghanistan, in Egypt, in Libya, whereas you swing the iPad around, you're changing where you're seeing in the view. So you're looking at the body of the guy who just got hit by the IED, and then you're floating up to look at the face of the guy treating him medically, and then you see the rockets going off over your head, and you could swing around and see that it's your guys.
Okay, I'm a little nauseous. Tony.
I'm gonna go mainstream. I think that I think Milo, even though he's like uber creepy right now, is this ability to interact and have the code be sufficiently dynamic that your reactions to it and how you do it changes what happens in a game. I think has tremendous potential for
Yeah,
for
that's it for
professional
me too.
storytelling.
I mean, I look at that and I go, my gosh, the chance to interact with a character and to actually have them be sentient beings to your sentient being is like it's
I'm demon hunting with the Winchester boys as soon as it's out.
Skynet.
yeah, cool. Thank you very much, and thank you guys very much. I hope you walked away with something logical from this. I have no idea.
All right. This is your chance for a cookie break. We'll see you all at 3:50.